Welcome to a special edition of Gospel Truth with Andrew Wommack, a teaching ministry that focuses on God's unconditional love and grace. This week, Andrew is joined by guest speakers Richard Harris and David and Tim Barton as they discuss the upcoming elections and America's hope for the future. And now, here's Andrew.
Welcome to our Wednesday's broadcast of the Gospel Truth. I'm Andrew Wommack, but today I have David and Tim Barton with Wall Builders with me, and I tell you what a blessing they are. David happens to be on our board of directors for Truth and Liberty, which Richard is the director of that. David helped set up our third year practical government school, and he's been very involved, and I tell you, it's just tremendous how God is using them. So this week, we're trying to encourage you to be the salt and the light in this earth that the Lord called us to be. We've been talking about a lot of things concerning our elections that are coming up, that these are critical elections that literally, we say this all the time, but it is critical whether this nation survives or not. That's how bad the left is going. And so we need to talk about voter integrity, because after the 2020 elections, there's a lot of Christians that just think, what does it matter? They're going to rig the vote anyway. Why does it matter whether we vote or not?
You know, I think the answer to that, there's a couple answers to that, is I'm going to go back to John Quincy Adams. John Quincy Adams, who was a founding father, who grew up in the Revolution, became the best diplomat we had by the end of the Revolution. He goes on to serve in the first 5 presidencies. He becomes the 6th president. And after that is when he really kind of becomes famous, because he fights slavery at a time when slavery was going through the roof. And in that time, in the 17 years in Congress, I don't know that he won a vote on anything in 17 years. And
he won a vote over the gag order.
Well, that's right. He did get one. He did get one win.
At least one in 17 years.
They got so tired of hearing him talk about anti-slavery, the House actually passed an unconstitutional order that said you cannot bring up anything you've ever talked about before, like slavery. And so they tried to shut him down, which they didn't. He kept speaking.
And the reason was he was the political leader of the anti-slavery movement. He was the political face of that. And in the First Amendment, it says that you can petition Congress for redress of grievances. And so there was anti-slavery petitions that were sent into Congress because he's the leader of the movement. He's the one that would present them. There was one day he had more than 900 petitions. And it was a majority pro-slavery Congress at the time. He says there was only about 20% of people that were really anti-slavery. And that number, there might have been more that would have identified as anti-slavery, but he says, you know, only 20% are really fighting against this thing. And so when he brings all these petitions, and he does this every week, they're like, we are tired of having to vote on these issues that we already know we're not voting for. So that's when they went to the Rules Committee to pass a new rule. The rule they called the John Quincy Adams gag order, because it was made just to shut this guy up. And he was there long enough that he was able to persuade enough people to his side. There were enough freshmen that were joining.
Not on the slavery issue, but on the
free speech issue. On the free speech issue. That you should be able to petition to talk about these issues openly. And there were more anti-slavery people joining, so they finally have enough votes to overturn that. And when they did, they actually gave him a cane as a gift. It's still on the Smithsonian on display. I don't remember which Smithsonian it's at. Up in Washington, D.C.
In D.C., it's an ivory cane. It has a gold band around it. It has the date that they repealed that gag order. And so he really considered that a huge victory. But all that time, 17 years, and he's really not won any votes except perhaps that one. And so, I mean, if you look at that, you're not a very good representative for your district. You're not getting anything passed back home. You're not. And so when asked why do you keep doing this, his answer was this, and it's a brilliant answer. He said, because duty is ours, results are God's.
I've heard that quote, but not the backstory.
And that's he just would not give up. He lost. You know what? If I lose every election the rest of my life, I'm still going to vote in every election.
And so he was really anti-slavery, and he fought against it, and he didn't win in his lifetime, but he did the right thing.
Well, he was
someday
also,
he's going to stand before God.
He was also part of the Second Great Awakening. And one of the things about a great awakening is it's not a revival. Revival is a short meeting that happens over a weekend. It doesn't change all that much. You might get some people saved, but it doesn't change the culture.
At least by most of our terminology, because you had other, like the Toronto revival, Brownsville revival, there were some revivals that went more than a weekend. But generally speaking, a revival is a much shorter activity than an awakening would be.
An awakening is something that transforms over time. It changes the way people think. It changes the next generation. And so John Quincy Adams actually had opportunity to help train a young freshman congressman named Abraham Lincoln. And he died before he saw anything Abraham Lincoln did. But part of a great awakening is it's a long-term plan. And so voting has to be a long-term plan. I am going to vote every time. And for me particularly, I look at Luke 19 and Matthew 25, where the master called his servants together and said, hey, here's a trust. Go take care of this till I come back. And the vote is that way. He said, hey, here's a vote. Do what you can with the nation till I get back. And when he got back, there was one of the guys who said, I didn't do anything with it. I knew it wasn't going to make a difference. I knew it wasn't. And that's what too many Christians say about their vote. And he said, you wicked and slothful servant, out into outer darkness, because they wouldn't take what God had given them and used it. And I'm going to be real blunt on this. If a Christian takes a vote that he has and doesn't use it, it's that same scenario, because that's a God-given opportunity, and the Founding Fathers saw it that way. We'll stand before God at the end time. He'll say, what'd you do with your family? What'd you do with your job? What'd you do with whatever? What'd you do with the vote I gave you? Well, I didn't do anything with that. That's not an acceptable answer. And so even if it turns out that I cast a vote for a loser every time, I'm going to keep voting every time. Like John Quincy Adams, duty is ours, results are God's.
Amen.
Well, and doesn't James say that he who knoweth to do good and doeth it not, to him it is sin?
James 4:17.
And so we are obligated to use this, and you know, as Americans, we're so accustomed to it that we've forgotten how sacred and special the right to vote is, right? That most of the world doesn't have this opportunity, and for us to throw it aside and say, oh, it doesn't matter, is really kind of shameful, isn't it?
And I will add to that. I don't know that the systems are rigged. We know that voter fraud exists. There's no question about it. We've documented it. We don't know how extensive it is. We don't know if it's all 50 states. It doesn't matter. Even if I knew that I was going into a voting booth that is rigged and I knew that it was going to be rigged, I would still cast a vote, because I don't do it for the results. I do it because it's the right thing to do. I answer to God.
Well, and we do want the right results, right?
We want the right
to say
result.
We're not doing it for the results. I mean, we care about the results. But even if we knew people are going to cheat, it doesn't change our responsibility.
That's right.
And to be clear, in the House and Senate this year, I mean, Josh Hawley, senator from Missouri, I think he had more than 130,000 illegal ballots that he went through from Nevada alone. And Trump lost by far less than 130,000 ballots in Nevada. There were tens of thousands in Wisconsin. So there is more and more evidence coming out that there is voter fraud unquestionably happening. And I think it's important that we acknowledge what we're saying is not that we shouldn't also try to solve these problems, but there are some Christians who would get discouraged and throw up their hands and want to quit and go home and say, well, then what's the point of even trying? We should do everything we can while we are here. It's a John Quincy Adams mentality. John Quincy Adams, well, he was in Congress for 17 years, and he lost every vote against slavery the entire time he was there. And that was his main issue. At that point, John Quincy Adams has one of the most remarkable lives of any president in American history, one of the most impressive resumes, because he grows up in the middle of the Revolution. He is actually a 6-year-old at the Battle of Bunker Hill. He and his mom are standing on a hill while it happens. He's watching the battle unfold. Just a year or two later, his father, he wrote about how his father had said he needed to take his musket and go start training with the Massachusetts Minutemen, because he didn't know when you might have to be able to use this to defend your life and your family. And so, like, he's growing up in the midst of this. He gets to go with his dad on diplomatic missions over to Paris. He actually gets an appointment by Congress to be the secretary to America's diplomat to Paris, John Adams. When he's 19, he's actually chosen by George Washington to be a diplomat. George Washington becomes president, and then he's in his early 20s, and he's a diplomat under George Washington for his entire presidency. At the end beginning of Washington's presidency, he says this is the best diplomat America has. He's a diplomat under his father, John Adams. Under Thomas Jefferson, he's a U.S. senator. James Madison brings him out of diplomatic retirement to come back and help America again. John Quincy Adams negotiates the end of the War of 1812. Under James Monroe, he's the Secretary of State. He then becomes the 6th president of the United States. So this guy doesn't need to go serve in Congress. He has the most impressive political career of any American president probably ever. And yet he goes to Congress because he says there's a great evil that is yet to be remedied.
Oh, praise the Lord.
It's the evil of slavery. And he knows he is picking a fight that is an uphill battle. He knows the odds of him winning this are extreme, to say the least. But he knows it's the right thing to do. And this is where one of the most impressive things about John Quincy Adams, and that, as you mentioned, his motto, his entire life, he said his motto was duty is ours, results are God's. His philosophy was, it's only up to me to do the right thing. It's up to God what happens after that. And I think for far too many Christians, we become more pragmatists.
We prejudge the results. We determine what's going to happen.
And we say, wait a second.
Polls are so deadly because they'll influence.
Why would we oppose Pharaoh when we're slaves and he has the army, right?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, why would we're going to the Red Sea? It's better for us to go back and be slaves and be here at the Red Sea. The reality is, if there wasn't a God, then being a pragmatist makes sense.
But when it comes to election integrity, one thing people, just a legal point real quick, after an election, to overturn the results of it, the candidate who's challenging has to show that the fraudulent votes would have made a difference in the outcome. If Christians stay home and vote and don't vote, and there is fraud in the election, you're taking away the ability of Donald Trump or whoever to come to the court and say, these fraudulent votes should be thrown out because it would have made a difference. You're just making it so much easier for them to cheat. We need to make it as hard as possible for them to cheat, and the only way we're going to do that is if we turn out in record numbers.
There is a great axiom, actually both of them, that says sunlight's the best disinfectant.
Yeah.
And one of the things, we know Chad Conley's a good friend. We've had him on before. And Chad, one of the things that he did back 3 years ago in Virginia was they got 312 churches in Virginia and said, hey, why don't you guys go put eyeballs on the voting list in your county? Not the whole state, just your county and your precinct, literally, your precinct. And so the churches did that. And what are we looking for? Well, you're looking for anything that might be wrong. Well, what would be wrong? Look for people who are voting and they're more than 100 years old. Not that they can't, but if you've got a whole bunch of 100-year-old people voting, look at it and see if they're real people. And if you see more than 6 people at one address, check that. And so they were looking at it, and the church people were looking at it, and they called Chad and they said, hey, we found an address here that's got 16 people at this address. Mm-hmm. What do you think? I think it must be a big house. Why don't you go look at it? And it was a cow pasture. There's not a building on it at all, but 17 people voting out of a cow pasture, so they got them thrown off the voter roll because it was illegal. And we were in Michigan after that, this last election cycle in Michigan, and again, the same thing. Churches look at voter rolls, and so they did, and what they found, lots of stuff. The first, the voting list, they gave them were 100 names on each list. And they asked, we just want to see the voters who are over 100 and still voting. And so they got these lists, and each one had 100 names on the page. So in the first 2 pages, first 200 people, and they're voting. These are active voters. They went and checked the obituary, and 67 of them had been dead, and they have an obituary of them, but they're still voting, and they're dead. So get them pulled off. They found a guy named Jason Daniel in Michigan, and Jason Daniel had voted twice in the 2020 election, which is a real problem. The bigger problem was Jason Daniel was born in 1850. So the dude goes through the Civil War and he's still voting. And so when churches will do something like that 5.4% of the vote in Virginia they found was fraudulent. And churches are the ones who took that off.
And Governor Youngkin won in Virginia because of the Christians and churches that got involved, because churches decided they wanted to train people in their church to be poll watchers, because they were being able to watch and flag the ballots where there was fraudulent activity. They were able actually to register, I think, 70,000 first-time voters in their own churches. So people in church who just weren't registered to vote. And Governor Youngkin won by 60-something thousand votes.
77,000. In those 312 churches, they registered 77,000 people in the churches who had never before registered and voted, and Youngkin won by 65,000. Now, there's tens of thousands of churches in Virginia. We're only talking 312. That's not a big amount.
And so it's not only important to vote, but you can get involved in the process by becoming poll watchers. How do you do that?
Yes, and the reason that's important to follow up, Richard, what you were saying is that's how. If we don't get involved, they don't even have to cheat, right?
True.
But if they try to cheat, then it's easier for them to get away with it when people aren't showing up. But when people show up, when we're doing mail-in ballots, which I know in Colorado that's becoming a thing, well, somebody ought to be able to look and go, hey, can we signature verify? Can we check some addresses on this? If there's not people watching it, it's easier to get away with it. So how do you get involved and do that? It's different in different locations. For what it is to be a poll watcher, some of the best things to do, there are groups like a Moms for America, a Moms for Liberty, like a Truth and Liberty. There are really great organizations that actually help train people of how to get involved. And sometimes it's a county official that you need to go talk to and find out, what are the rules for our county? Is this something that I'm a volunteer for? Do I have to actually sign up and take a course? Is there training for this? Is this a paid position? But you can find out what it takes and go through that. And oftentimes, it's not a very difficult process.
No, it's not.
It's really just showing up. And in so many situations, I was actually an election judge back in Texas for my precinct for 8 years. And I was a young 20-year-old when I started doing it because nobody else wanted to do it. And I knew the county chair, and they were saying, please, will somebody please take one of these positions? We need people desperately. And so I filled in just because they couldn't find anybody. And for like 8 years, they couldn't find anybody else. And I'm saying this because in most situations, they're desperately looking for people who will help them in this process. And if we are there to help in the process, we are also there to help make sure that the rules are followed and it's done in a legal, ethical manner.
And I would add, too, that in talking about Chad Connolly earlier, that's an organization I work with a whole lot. And they work with pastors and churches.
Faith Wins is their organization.
Excuse me, Faith Wins. Faith Wins. And so they were working in we were talking about Michigan and Virginia. But if you go to faithwins.org, there's a place there where you can get information on how to be a poll watcher, how to get trained on election stuff. Pastor 𝗵𝗶𝗶𝘀 is the guy. And because all 50 states are different, which is great. The Constitution, Article 2, says all the states get to determine their own standards and states. So we have 50 different standards, essentially, and that's fine. But at Faith Wins, we can get you plugged in your state with your laws, with your rules, what you can do. And it is different from state to state. But faithwins.org is a great place to go to be able to get engaged in that kind of poll watching to have election integrity.
You know, this is another thing about our Truth and Liberty website is that we link to all of these places. So if you go to truthandliberty.net, you can get a link to everything that we're talking about. To Wall Builders, we had a link to there and everything on there. So it's really a good website.
Yeah, we've just rebuilt it, Andrew, and we've got a brand new resources center where you can search according to topics and everything else. We've got hundreds of links there to help you get involved and to make a difference.
And you also have a pastor's toolkit.
That's right.
What is that?
Well, we've assembled the very best resources that are out there that a pastor needs to turn his church into a transformative agent in the community. We begin with evangelism, and then we have voting resources. All of it's legal for you, 501c3 compliant, educational resources, and then legal resources in case you've got questions. The pastor doesn't have to do it all. It's all right there. These programs already exist. Civic action teams, for example, like culture impact teams or salt and light councils, where your church can become that center of godly values in the community and exert that influence over not just politics, but every area. But it's all legal, and it'll enable you to be salt and light in the community. And we have examples right here in Colorado that we can point to, training programs and everything. So check out the Pastor's Toolkit.
Well, guys, one thing too that I would add is, as we're looking at Christians and encouraging them to get involved, obviously one of the big dilemmas is, does my vote even matter? Does it count? Should I do this? But another thing I hear often, and I know all of us around election time, we get the questions, well, who should I be voting for anyway? Now, if it comes to this presidential election, hopefully we're not that confused in the presidential election, but you have down ballot individuals and down ballot races. And this is what is so important for Christians to understand who some of these people are, because it's not unusual. We've seen, unfortunately, we have a legislative network at 𝗷𝗶𝗶𝗀𝗃 called the Pro-Family Legislative Network, where we work with legislators in all 50 states, helping to promote godly policy. In fact, we've seen some amazing things over the last couple of years. We saw earlier this year where Louisiana passed a 10 Commandments bill, which we could spend a lot of time talking about that later. Just amazing that they're going to have now the 10 Commandments going in their public schools. We're seeing places like in Idaho and Oklahoma, where they're working to get the Bible back in schools. Actually, Oklahoma is already full force doing this. A lot of amazing things happening, but part of why this matters is some of those are done by state reps. And so you have your state elected officials, and we have seen, unfortunately, some really good state elected officials, and there would be some groups coming in and saying, oh, no, that's not really conservative, and they're not good. We need to remove them. And you have this infighting even of conservative groups. And so sometimes you ask the question, well, I don't know who to vote for. Who should we vote for? And this is where, Richard, I know you guys at Truth and Liberty, y'all do voters guides. And of course, there's Christian Voter Guide, there's iVoter Guide, there's a lot of things out there. But this is why voter guides exist, to help Christians know who are some of my local level candidates.
Right. And, you know, we link to iVoter Guide and Christian Voter Guide on our website in our resources center at truthandliberty.net. We produce our own voter guide for Colorado, and you can find those on our website as well. But I learned this from you, David, that statistics show, you know, I think a lot of Christians, they want to vote, they want to do what's right, but they'd rather do nothing than do the wrong thing. And when it comes to voting, sometimes they don't know where the candidates stand, and they'd rather not make a mistake. You can get these simple voter guides, and you can look at these things. So what we do on our voter guide, for example, is we list issues on the left-hand side and tell you support, oppose, support, oppose, support, oppose, whether the candidate is for or against it. Take, for example, school choice or vaccine mandates or voter ID law or late-term abortion. And we cover these, and so you can look at a glance and you can tell which of the candidates is more closely aligned with biblical values, and that enables you to really easily be salt and light in this election.
And we have got to get involved. So again, we've got all of these materials. Tell them quickly about this Hope for the Future. What is that?
I'm so excited about this movie, Andrew. It's a documentary film that we've created that tells the story of the 3 prophetic words that God gave you over the last several years, that we're in a great awakening, that the woke stuff is being exposed, and the people in positions of influence are not going to be there, and showing you evidence of this actually happening in our world. Like 150 to 200 colleges and universities have abandoned their DEI programs. That's just one thing. There were 16,000 people baptized off the beaches of California on Pentecost Sunday. Millions of people saved in Iran. I'm telling you, God is on the move, and we need to stay hopeful, encouraged, and like you say, Dave, we need to look at the 2 Spies network, not the 10 Spies network, and keep holding on and moving forward.
So how do they get that?
Well, they can get Hope for the Future on the Truth and Liberty website. Go to truthandliberty.net. And we're making it available to all Truth and Liberty members. To be a member, you sign up and make an automatic contribution to Truth and Liberty every month of $5 or more, or you make a $50 one-time contribution, and we'll send that movie to you.
And then we also have this CD album that was David and Tim on my program in 2021 talking about the Great Awakening. It was dealing more with the spiritual impact and how it reflected in the nation. And then we have a whole biblical worldview series. We've now got, I think, 4 or 5 of these. This one is foundational, just what is a biblical worldview and foundational stuff. And then we go into racism, we go into socialism, and what else?
Sexuality.
Yeah.
And not in this foundational one, but there's its own series on that.
These different deals. And so anyway, we have a whole bunch of biblical worldview albums available, and there's up to, I think, 10 or 12 different ministers that are ministering. You're on some of those.
And there's study guides for small group studying there too.
So anyway, we've got a lot of material, more than what I can advertise right here. So listen to our announcer. He's going to give you all this information. And we encourage you to please get involved. Recognize that your vote counts, and not only your vote, but your participation in all of this. Your opinion counts. Be sure to share it with other people. So check it out. Listen to our announcer, and then join us again tomorrow. We're going to continue to have David and Tim Barton on our program.
We're coming up on election time in America, and that's a big time in American history. You know, in previous generations, we used to have 100% voter turnout back in the early 1800s, the founding era, and now we're down to a much lower number. And so Christians are wondering, should I vote? The answer is yes, you should vote. Get informed, find out about the candidates. Remember what Jesus told us in Luke 19:13, said, you occupy till I come. He expects us to be involved. Every Christian needs to be involved in voting. Make sure you vote in this election.
Explore the new Truth and Liberty website. Empower yourself with Christian liberties and biblical truths, now with helpful features like the Pastor's Toolkit, video archives, and better search capabilities. Unlock access to an extensive database featuring hundreds of organizations, including the Family Research Council, Wall Builders, Andrew Wommack Ministries, and more. Visit our new website today at truthandliberty.net.
I want to encourage you to listen in to our Truth and Liberty broadcast. We do this every Wednesday and Friday at 4 p.m. Mountain Time. And this is not only teaching from the Word of God, that's the truth part of it, God's Word is truth, but also we're talking about current events, and we're going to be dealing with things that affect us, and I believe we'll be dealing with it from a biblical perspective. It'll be a real blessing to you. So check it out every Wednesday and Friday, our Truth and Liberty program, 4 p.m. Mountain Time.
Andrew is offering his booklet, The Great Awakening, as his free gift to you today. This offer is limited to one free booklet per household and is available in the US, UK, Canada, and Australia. Contact us today to receive your free booklet. This week's panel discussion with Richard Harris and David and Tim Barton is available as part of the God and Country series as a newly updated CD album, TV DVD album, or as a USB made from our daily television broadcast. Also available is the Great Awakening series as a CD album, TV DVD album, and as a USB. Each of these valuable resources are available for a gift of any amount when you contact us. These series are also available for audio download absolutely free from our website. Also on today's program, Andrew mentioned Biblical Worldview Foundational Truths. This product is available for $120. The Hope for the Future USB is a powerful film that delivers a message of hope and encouragement, reminding us of God's presence and His divine plan for America. This product is available for Truth and Liberty members or for a one-time donation of $50 or more. If you're not already a Truth and Liberty member, we invite you to become one today by visiting truthandliberty.net. We also want to say a special thank you to the grace partners of Andrew Wommack Ministries. Your gifts make it possible to put free ministry materials into the hands of many people in need. If you're not already a grace partner, we ask you to pray about becoming one today. You can become a grace partner through our website at awmi.net. While there, you can discover more product details and download additional free resources. You can also order resources or receive prayer by calling our helpline at 719-635-1111. We appreciate your generosity and hope to hear from you today. Join us again tomorrow as Andrew continues discussing America's hope for the future with Richard Harris and David and Tim Barton.
I'd like to give you an invitation to join me on October 31st through November the 2nd. I'm coming back to Dallas for our very last Gospel Truth Conference in the Dallas area. It's going to be at the Renaissance Dallas Addison Hotel. Jeremy Pearsons is going to be with me. He's going to be speaking. It's going to be a great time. And this will be our final time to hold a conference like this. I may come hold individual meetings, but I encourage you to come and be with us October the 31st through November the 2nd for our Dallas Gospel Truth Conference.